How We Think and Learn, From Perception to Cognition by Azlan Adnan, M.A., Wednesday, 20 May 2026.
MAURICE MERLEAU-PONTY'S Phenomenology of Perception by Azlan Adnan, M.A., Wednesday, 19 May 2026. Maurice Merleau-Ponty was born on March 14, 1908, in Rochefort, France. Raised in a middle-class family, he excelled in his studies and attended the prestigious Lycée Louis-le-Grand in Paris. He then went on to study at the École Normale Supérieure, for he became a student of both philosophy and psychology. Influenced by his professors, notably Leon Brunschvig and later Edmond Husserl, Merleau-Ponty became one of the central figures of 20th century phenomenology. His seminal work, Phenomenology of Perception, published in 1945, challenged the Cartesian split between mind and body. In it, he argued that perception is not a passive reception of data, but an active, embodied engagement with the world. His other major works include The Structure of Intuition and Sense and Nonsense 48. Academically, he held an notable professorship at the Collège de France, where he was a powerful force in shaping contemporary philosophy. His upbringing and exposure to both classical French philosophy and modern psychology allowed him to bridge gaps between abstract thought and lived experience. Merleau-Ponty's legacy endures in phenomenology, existentialism, and cognitive science. His insistence on the embodied nature of perception opened new avenues for exploring how we make sense of ourselves in the world.
The Structure of Behavior, La Structure du Comportement. Maurice Merleau-Ponty's The Structure of Behavior, published in 1942, marks a pivotal early moment in his intellectual development. In this work, Merleau-Ponty confronts the dominant paradigms of his era, particularly the behaviorist, mechanistic views of human action, and offers a radical reinterpretation of behavior. Rather than treating behavior as a set of automatic responses to external stimuli, Merleau-Ponty situates behavior in a field of subjective, embodied engagement. This shift laid the groundwork for his later, more mature phenomenology. In The Structure of Behavior, Merleau-Ponty begins by critiquing the reflexive psychology that was prevalent in the early 20th century. Behaviorists like Pavlov and Watson approached human and animal behavior as a predictable chain of stimulus and response, reducing complex actions to mechanical reactions. Merleau-Ponty saw this as a dangerous oversimplification. He argues that behavior is not a mere chain of mechanical reflexes, but a purposeful, directed attempt to grasp the world. This insight came from his fascination with the way perception is always active, an engagement in which the body and the world are intertwined. The book is structured in a dialectical manner, beginning with a critique of reflexes and instinct, and moving toward a more nuanced understanding of intentionality. Merleau-Ponty introduces the idea of structure, not as a static system, but as a dynamic field. For him, behavior is structured not from above by some rational will, but from within, emerging from an organism's intentional grasp of its environment. In this way, he anticipates later developments in systems theory and cybernetics, where behavior is seen as a self-organizing process within a field. Another key concept in The Structure of Behavior is the idea of chiasm, the intertwining of subject and object. Though he would later elaborate on this concept, it emerges here as an embryonic notion. Perception does not place us outside the world, observing it objectively, but entangles us within it. This intertwining means that every act of behavior is both an attempt to reach out to the world and a way of being shaped by it. The Structure of Behavior also addresses the development of movement and the emergence of habits. Merleau-Ponty observes that even the most basic acts, grasping a pen, walking across a room, are not just mechanical responses. They involve a tacit knowledge, a bodily know-how that precedes conceptual understanding. These habits, he claims, form a bridge between reflex and free purposeful action. Thus, the structure of behavior is never a static scaffold. It is a living, evolving, contextual process.
Okay, you stopped not at the end, but you stopped at contextual process. So I want you to restart from the work's legacy right to the end of the next 5,000 until the very end of the article. But I want you to amp up the plummy accent and speak the French words in a truly French, voice or accent. And can you do that now, please? Start from the work's legacy.
Of course, I'll amplify the plummy tone and give the French words a proper French accent, starting from the work's legacy. The work's legacy lies in how it bridges the gap between natural science and phenomenology. While Merleau-Ponty was not a biologist, he engaged with contemporary science, especially the biology of perception, and argued that the human body is a kind of midpoint between pure biological processes and the subjective life of the person. This tension between the biological and the existential would shape not only his own future work, but also later phenomenologists and existential thinkers. His insistence that behavior is not a simple reflex arc, but a purposive, directed movement helped open the door for a more holistic psychology, one that would later influence thinkers like R.D. Laing and even the rise of embodied cognitive science. In sum, the structure of behavior not only laid the foundation for Merleau-Ponty's later, more mature phenomenology, but also offered a radical alternative to reductive behaviorist paradigms. By situating human action in a field of embodied, intentional engagement, Merleau-Ponty opened up new ways of thinking about perception, habit, and free action. His work remains influential in phenomenology, psychology, and even contemporary cognitive science, where his insistence on embodied knowing continues to shape debates about how we think, act, and experience the world.
Phenomenology of Perception, Phenomenologie de la Perception. Maurice Merleau-Ponty's Phenomenology of Perception, first published in 1945, stands as a landmark in 20th century philosophy. Unlike purely abstract epistemological inquiries, Merleau-Ponty's work reoriented phenomenology toward the embodied, lived experience of perception. Drawing from his studies in both philosophy and psychology, Merleau-Ponty disrupts the dualism that had dominated Western thought, particularly the mind-body split inherited from Descartes. The book is structured in a way that methodically dismantles the traditional separation between subject and object. For Merleau-Ponty, perception is not a passive reception of sensory data. It is an active, intentional engagement. He insists that our primary way of being in the world is through embodied perception. In his view, the body is not merely a vehicle for the mind. It is the medium through which we encounter reality. Thus, he takes perception as a starting point, examining how the senses, vision, touch, hearing, mediate our sense of self and the world around us. One of the book's central concepts is the lived body, le corps propre. Merleau-Ponty argues that the body is not an object in the world like a stone. It is the very means by which we inhabit the world. Our gestures, our movements, and even our intentions are inseparable from our bodily being. This was a revolutionary claim because it countered the prevalent rationalist and dualist paradigms that place the mind above the body. Instead, he argued that the body is the first site of knowing. Merleau-Ponty's Phenomenology of Perception also draws heavily on the concept of intentionality. Borrowed from Husserl, intentionality refers to how consciousness is always directed toward something. It is always about something. Merleau-Ponty extends this idea, arguing that we never perceive a detached world. We perceive it as meaningful precisely because our body is engaged in it. This leads him to critique the objectivist approach of natural science when applied to human experience. While natural science explains the world in terms of objects and causal laws, Merleau-Ponty insists that human experience is always more than the sum of its parts. Thus, the meaning we experience is always embodied, always contextual. Another crucial concept is the intertwining, which he later elaborates on in other works. For Merleau-Ponty, subject and object do not stand opposed, instead they are woven together. Our perception is a dynamic interplay between self and world, never static or purely subjective. In this way, Merleau-Ponty opens up a more fluid, non-reductive way of thinking about human consciousness. The impact of Phenomenology of Perception has been profound. It became a foundational text not only in philosophy, but also in psychology, aesthetics, and cognitive science. His emphasis on embodied experience paved the way for later phenomenologists, such as Jean-Luc Baudrillard, and later existentialists like Jean-Paul Sartre. Moreover, his insights have influenced contemporary debates in cognitive science, especially in areas like embodied cognition, where thinkers argue that our mental processes are kind of grounded in bodily interaction with the world.
In sum, Phenomenology of Perception is not only a cornerstone of Merleau-Ponty's work, but also a touchstone for an entire lineage of thought.
Sense and Nonsense. Maurice Merleau-Ponty's Sense and Nonsense, published in 1948, stands as a pivotal reflection on the limitations of rationalism and the role of perception in meaning-making. In this collection of essays, Merleau-Ponty revisits core themes from his earlier work, particularly the embodied nature of knowledge, and situates them within a broader critique of epistemology. The book is both a meditation on how we come to know things and a critique of the overconfidence of scientific reductionism. The essays in Sense and Nonsense serve as a philosophical intervention, pushing back against the growing dominance of a purely empirical, positivist approach to knowledge. Merleau-Ponty contends that much of what we call knowledge is rooted in a pre-reflective, embodied grasp of the world. We do not first build abstract concepts and then apply them to experience. Instead, our sense of the world is always prior, a felt, lived engagement. Thus, he argues when science reduces phenomena to mere data points, it ignores the sense in which we experience the world as meaningful. One of the key essays is a polemic against Sartre's existentialist reductionism. While Sartre emphasized radical freedom and the idea that human existence is nothing but a project, Merleau-Ponty argues that we are always already embedded in a world, and this world shapes our possibilities. Thus, freedom is not a disembodied leap, but a continuous unfolding of our engagement with the world. Another crucial theme is the relationship between language and meaning. Merleau-Ponty explored how words are never neutral conveyors of objective facts. Rather, they are embodied gestures laden with context. Thus, we must recognize that all knowledge is a kind of interpretation, grounded in the ambiguity of language. Artists are privileged mode of knowledge. Artists, he argues, do not just represent the world. They reveal its latent meanings. In this way, art allows us to perceive what is usually invisible, allowing us to glimpse the preconceptual, felt dimension of existence. By showing that art captures something that escapes pure rationality, Merleau-Ponty reaffirms the power of embodied perceptual knowledge. The influence of Sense and Nonsense is far-reaching. It played a crucial role in later phenomenology, influencing thinkers like Jean-Luc Marion and Emmanuel Levinas, who also sought to articulate a richer, more embodied sense of knowledge. Merleau-Ponty's insistence that perception precedes conceptual thought paved the way for embodied cognition. Contemporary cognitive science, especially in the mark of scholars like Sean Gallagher, draws on Merleau-Ponty's critique of disembodied thought, arguing that cognition is always situated, embedded in a lived bodily world. Thus, Merleau-Ponty with this work reclaims the space for ambiguity, for the intuition that knowledge is never purely objective or purely subjective, but always an unfolding dialogue between the two. In this way, Sense and Nonsense remains a vital text, a reminder that our quest for truth must respect the ambiguity of lived experience, the subtle interplay between sense and nonsense, and the embodied way in which we understand the world. I and Mind. L'Œil l'Esprit. Maurice Merleau-Ponty's I and Mind, published posthumously in 1961, is a luminous culmination of his reflections on perception, art, and the embodied character of human knowledge. In this short but profound essay, Merleau-Ponty turns his phenomenological lens toward the nature of visual experience, arguing that seeing is not a passive reception, but an active creative process. This text crystallizes his later thought, where he pushes beyond the limits of traditional epistemology to show that our relation to the world is always mediated by the body and by perception. In I and Mind, Merleau-Ponty begins by asserting that vision is not simply a matter of receiving light through the eyes. It is a form of dialogue. The eye, he argues, is not a detached observer, but is always immersed in the world. To see is to be engaged, to reach out toward what is visible. This was a radical departure from the more mechanistic views of perception that reduced seeing to a mere optical process. Instead, Merleau-Ponty emphasizes that vision is always a synthesis of the body and the mind. In the sense, the artist, particularly the painter, becomes a paradigmatic figure, because the painter does not just represent the world. Through brushstrokes, the artist captures what is typically hidden, showing that vision is a synthesis of gesture and perception. Merleau-Ponty also critiques the Cartesian split between subject and object. In so doing, he shows that the body is not a thing we possess, but a medium through which we experience the world. The eye, as he puts it, is not isolated, but instead a part of a dynamic interplay. By reintegrating vision with the body, Merleau-Ponty reminds us that seeing is never neutral. It is always laden with preconceptions, habits, and expectations. Thus, I and Mind becomes a meditation not only on vision, but on how we live through our bodies, and how in art, this embodied vision can open us to the world's depths. The influence of I and Mind is profound. It became a cornerstone of Merleau-Ponty's later philosophy and was instrumental in shaping the trajectory of phenomenology. In the visual arts, influential thinkers like Jean-Paul Sartre, Jacques Derrida, and even contemporary art theorists drew on Merleau-Ponty's insights to argue that vision is not a detached scientific operation, but a creative existential act. In psychology and cognitive science, the idea that perception is embodied, not just an abstract computation, has shaped the rise of embodied cognition. Thus, Merleau-Ponty's insistence that we must see with our whole being, not just with our eyes, echoes in every exploration of how humans perceive, interpret, and create. In sum, I and Mind is a clarion call to recognize that our knowledge is rooted in embodied vision, a vision that not only sees, but also feels, gestures, and reaches out to the world.
The Visible and the Invisible. Le Visible et Invisible. Maurice Merleau-Ponty's The Visible and the Invisible, published posthumously in 1964, is a seminal exploration of perception and the epistemic limits of vision. As the culmination of Merleau-Ponty's phenomenology, it reconfigures the relationship between what we see and what we know. In this work, Merleau-Ponty argues that the visible, what we perceive with our eyes, always presupposes an invisible dimension. This invisible realm is not a void, but a field of possibilities. The depth and ambiguity underlying all perception. The book begins with a recognition of the inadequacy of classical philosophy, which, following Descartes, separates subject from object. Merleau-Ponty insists that this dualism obscures how we live in a world. For him, vision is not a passive mechanical reception of light. It is an active engagement. The body is not an object but a subject, and vision is a mode of being. Thus, we don't simply see things, we enter into a world. The visible world, in turn, is always shaped by what is invisible, the unspoken, the felt, the pre-reflective ground of all meaning. Merleau-Ponty introduces the concept of chiasm, a complex intertwining of the perceiver and the perceived. In this chiasm, the seer and the seen fold into each other. They are not distinct, but mutually implicated. Thus, the invisible is always present, as the horizon against which the visible emerges.
Explanation of Maurice Merleau-Ponty's concept of the chiasm. Maurice Merleau-Ponty introduces the concept of the chiasm as a fundamental structure of embodied experience. The chiasm, derived from the Greek letter chi, describes a reciprocal intertwining of subject and object, self and world. In this framework, Merleau-Ponty rejects a purely Cartesian split between mind and body, arguing instead that perception is a dynamic intertwining. In the chiasm, the perceiver and the perceived are folded into each other. We are both in the world and the world is in us. Central to the chiasm is reversibility. Merleau-Ponty emphasizes that we reach out to the world with our senses, but simultaneously the world reaches back and shapes us. For example, when I touch an object, I do not simply occupy a detached observer's position. Instead, my tactile involvement folds back into my sense of self. Thus, perception is not a passive reception, but a mutual entanglement. Contrast with René Descartes' dualism. Merleau-Ponty's chiasm stands in stark contrast to René Descartes' dualism. Descartes famously posited a rigid separation between res cogitans, the thinking mind, and res extensa, the extended body. In this Cartesian scheme, mind and body are distinct substances. Perception for Descartes is a process mediated by the mind, which interprets the body's sensory inputs as distinct from the inner mental life. In short, perception is a secondary abstract act of the mind upon the external world. By contrast, Merleau-Ponty dissolves this dichotomy. In his view, the body is not a mere vessel for the mind, but is constitutive of experience. The chiasm replaces Cartesian separation with a holistic intertwining. The body is both a means of knowing and a field of being. Significance to perception in cognitive science. The chiasm is pivotal to rethinking perception. Rather than being a passive mirror of an objective world, perception is an active, embodied engagement. This reframes cognitive science, which increasingly acknowledges embodied cognition. Our mind does not merely interpret abstract representations, but is rooted in bodily capacities. In epistemology, the chiasm has implications for the nature of knowledge. If we are intertwined with the world through perception, then knowing is not a disembodied act of pure reasoning. It is a situated, embodied process. Thus, epistemology is reconfigured as a practice emerging from our situated, embodied being in the world. In summary, the chiasm provides a dynamic model of how we are entangled with the world, offering a crucial corrective to dualistic epistemologies and paving the way for a more integrated, embodied science of knowing. Art from Merleau-Ponty is a privileged mode of access to this invisible. The painter's gesture, the sculptor's form, all evoke what lies beyond immediate sight, inviting us to dwell in ambiguity. This work has immense implications for epistemology, unlike a positivist or empiricist approach that sees knowledge as a matter of measuring visible facts. Merleau-Ponty suggests that knowledge is always embodied, always embedded in a lived perspective. Thus, we come to know the world not just by abstracting from it, but by being in it. His work thus challenges the Cartesian privileging of mind over body and opens a pathway for a more holistic epistemology, one rooted in perception, ambiguity, and embodied presence. Has had a significant impact on cognitive science and psychology. The idea that perception is embodied, no longer a mere passive intake of sensory data, has been pivotal. Thinkers like Alvin Noe, Sean Gallagher, and others have drawn on Merleau-Ponty to argue that cognition is always situated, that thinking is enacted through bodily interaction with the world. In this way, Merleau-Ponty's insistence that what we see is shaped by the unseen opens up a vast interdisciplinary field. It invites us to see not just that perception is a bridge to knowledge, but that knowledge is always embodied, always emerging from our lived relation with the world. In conclusion, the visible and the invisible is more than a reflection on what we see. It is a radical rethinking of how we know. By insisting that the visible always implies an invisible horizon, Merleau-Ponty invites us to reconsider epistemology itself. From perception to art to cognitive science, his work continues to resonate, showing that what we know is always enmeshed in how we see, feel, and move in the world. In Praise of Philosophy. Pour en Philosophie. Maurice Merleau-Ponty's In Praise of Philosophy, published posthumously in 1984, is a reflective culmination of his later thought, a meditation on the essential role of philosophy in a world increasingly dominated by scientific reductionism. This text, drawn from his late lectures and notes, reaffirms his commitment to phenomenology, but it also extends beyond mere epistemology. In this work, Merleau-Ponty argues that philosophy is not a luxury, but a vital practice, a way of returning to wonder, of remaining open to the ambiguity of lived experience. Philosophy, he contends, is the discipline that allows us to resist the temptation to reduce human existence to a set of calculable, measurable facts. Instead, it's a continuous dialogue between the self and the world, a refusal to let ourselves be satisfied with easy answers. In the collection of essays, Merleau-Ponty situates philosophy as a bridge between the visible and the invisible, the known and the unknown. He critiques the fragmentation produced by specialization, arguing that philosophy is the only discipline that can keep the whole of experience in view.
Thus, it's not just a set of abstract concepts, but a lived practice. His insistence on ambiguity, his refusal to close off meaning, makes philosophy a vital force. In this way, the book is a call to re-engage with philosophy, not as a luxury, but as a necessity. Its impact on later thought is profound. Philosophers such as Emmanuel Levinas and Jean-Luc Marion drew inspiration from Merleau-Ponty's call to ground philosophy in lived experience. Likewise, cognitive science and psychology, especially the embodied cognition movement, echo his insistence that knowledge arises not just in the abstract mind, but in embodied interaction. Thus, Merleau-Ponty's call for a philosophy that stays alive in ambiguity continues to inspire across disciplines. In his own life, Merleau-Ponty was a professor of philosophy at the Collège de France, one of France's most prestigious academic institutions. Born in 1908, he died at the age of 53 on May 3, 1961, from a sudden heart attack. His work was not just that of a writer, he was a pivotal academic figure, teaching at both the Collège de France and the Sorbonne, where he shaped a generation of thinkers. His untimely death cut short a brilliant career, but his influence continues to radiate through phenomenology, aesthetics, and cognitive science.
About the author. High velocity, high granularity thinking. Azlan Adnan is an autodidact and a polymath with an IQ of 168. He holds a Master of Arts in International Business and Management from the University of Westminster in London, and a postgraduate certificate in teaching from Royal Holloway, University of London. His mind operates at a level that is visibly and measurably different from the average person. While most people think in linear, surface-level patterns and stay within narrow domains, Azlan thinks in systems, layers, and deep causal connections. He moves at high velocity, rapidly synthesizing ideas while maintaining exceptional granularity, seeing fine details and subtle relationships that others completely miss. This rare combination of speed and resolution allows him to cross-pollinate concepts from physics, medicine, philosophy, consciousness studies, nutrition, politics, international relations, and religion in ways that feel both surprising and inevitable once you see them. This distinctive cognitive style is the driving force behind everything he writes. You can see it clearly in every chapter of this book and across the entire Mind Science series. The way he builds models, challenges entrenched assumptions, and connects seemingly unrelated phenomena is not just a writing style. It is how his mind naturally functions. Azlan has written more than 100 books covering a remarkably wide range of subjects, including mind science, health and nutrition, politics, Islam, Russia, Iran, and international relations. Every single one of these books is released completely free in the public domain. All of them can be downloaded at no cost from Z Library. He deliberately places all his writings in the public domain because he believes that powerful, high-resolution ideas should not be locked behind paywalls or controlled by institutions. Knowledge and clarity of thought, in his view, belong to humanity. His goal is simple: to make these ideas freely available to anyone in the world who is ready and willing to engage with them, regardless of their financial situation or background. What you are about to read is therefore not an ordinary book. It is the direct output of a mind that thinks at a fundamentally different resolution. Every page reveals not only new ideas, but a completely different way of seeing and understanding reality itself. This is Azlan Adnan's mind at work. A Writer's Manifesto by Azlan Adnan, M.A. As an agent provocateur and change agent, I write to shift paradigms. Nothing more, nothing less. I draw inspiration from Robert Baden-Powell's parting words, "Leave the world better than you found it." I also take heed of Buckminster Fuller's reminder, not to fight old systems, but to build new ones so compelling that the old becomes obsolete. So here is my pledge. Every book I write enters the public domain the moment it is finished. No royalties, no gatekeeping. Download my work from my Telegram channels, Z Library, and pass it along. Copy it. Quote it. Seed it into every mind that needs it. If you gain something from these words, wonderful. Spread them freely and help someone else along their path. Should you wish to contribute, do so voluntarily. Not more than 5% of what you earn this month. The same principle as T. Harv Ecker's fifth jar. Treat it as a gesture of solidarity, not obligation. Whatever reaches me goes towards my various eye treatments. Keep the rest for yourself, and keep the chain moving forward. This is how we remake the world, one liberated idea at a time.
A heartfelt light, To every soul whose hand did give, you've helped me dream, helped me live. In darkest hours your light came through, with hearts so kind, so pure, so true. Your gifts, like stars in deepest night, have steered me gently toward the light. Each coin, each word, each silent prayer, a thread of hope, so rich, so rare. My eyes once dimmed, now seek the skies, and slowly, clearer visions rise. Because of you, I dare to see the world again, its grace, its plea. Your compassion's flame will not just stay with me alone. It lights the way, for others wandering through despair, to feel the warmth of selfless care. You've shown what love in action means, in quiet ways through giving scenes. You've built a bridge from soul to soul, and made the broken feel more whole. So let this thanks rise like a song, a melody both soft and strong. May your example gently call more hearts to rise to give. To fall into the joy of lifting pain, of planting hope where none remains. Your kindness walks beside me still, a light, a love, a living will.
Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to show your support.